Today, you and I are building a complete Microsoft Power Automate desktop project together. My name is Jensen. I'm an RPA teacher and a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional. In today's case, our company receives emails in Outlook. Attached to those emails are PDF invoices. We want to save the PDF invoice, extract the invoice data from the PDF, type it into our application, which is the Contoso Invoicing app, and we want to add the data into a reconciliation Excel sheet. The techniques we use, that is PDF extraction, regular expressions, RegEx, UI automation and selectors, Excel work, DateTime Manipulation, all performed in Microsoft Power Automate Desktop. Download the course materials from the video description below. Place it on your desktop. It is a zip file. Double-click to move into it. We are going to need this project folder. So simply just move it to your desktop and close the folder again. Now double-click the project. These are all the important files that we're going to use in this exercise. It is 4 folders. We have the emails folders, which is 6 emails. We are going to use them a little bit later in the session. Now move back. We also have the input, and here we have the PDFs. We have 6 PDFs, and let me show you what these are about. It is invoices, and we want to scrape the data from this invoice. We want the date. We want the name here. We want the email. We also want the total. We could extract everything, but for this exercise, we'll take specific parts. Each invoice is structured the same. Let me open up number 5. And that is important. That is why we can use RegEx. In case you have unstructured data, that means that you have different kinds of invoices. Click the video in the upper right corner. That will teach you how to do it with AI. Let me close this again. So these PDFs, in fact, these are attached, let me go back, to our emails here. We'll see that a little bit later. We also have a links folder. Here I place 2 links that we are going to use in the exercise. Let me go back. Finally, we have an output folder. Let me open it. With a reconciliation sheet. I'll double click to open it. In here, we want to add our data to once we have extracted it and typed it into our application. Let's build everything in Power Automate Desktop. So I'll close this Excel and I move back. First, we will just work with the PDFs. Then we will make it work with emails. So go into Input, PDFs, and then just grab one of these PDFs. We will make it work with one PDF first. So hover your mouse over one of these PDFs, Shift, right-click, copy as path. Now we will create a flow in Power Automate Desktop. We'll create a new flow by clicking New Flow, and I will call it Invoice Extraction. And I'll click Create. It's very important that you build with me. In that way, you'll learn the most. So let me maximize it. I'll create a region. And a region is simply just a container for some actions. It's very nice to structure our flows. It will get ignored the region itself during runtime. So here I'll call this Initialization. Here. And I'll click Save. Then you'll find a set variable here and drag it into the region. This is the variable for our project path. We will create a variable that will store the path to our folder. So I'll say project path like this. And then in the value, I'll press Ctrl V. This is the path to the PDF, as you can see here. So what I want to do first is to remove the quotation marks, like here. And I want this path to be only the project path. So I have this one here, I'll make a Control X. I repeat, Control X. That will copy it. We will cut it because we will use it a little bit later. So now our file path is stored here. I'll click Save. Now go find another region here and drag it in below. This is our next region. We will call this one Extract Invoices and click Save. Find and extract text from PDF here and drag it in here. We need a PDF file. We will use the project path from up here. So I'll click this little X and double click project path. Then we also need the rest. That will be the path to our specific PDF file. We have that in the clipboard, remember. So I can just press Ctrl V here. We can see that the variables produced is called extracted PDF text. Now I will click Save and let's go run it. Here over to the right, we can see the extracted PDF text variable. If I double click here, this is what it is reading. Let me just expand it. We will copy all of this, so place your mouse inside it, Control A, Control C. Now we will create the pattern that will extract this. So click Close here. Move out to the course materials. So it is in our project folder in the links. You will go to RegEx Storm, so double click that. That will take us to the RegEx Storm. You can also Google it or type the address in directly if you prefer. In the input, we press Ctrl V. This is our invoice. And be careful. You should never put in private data on a public website like this. In case you're going to do it with a company invoice, make sure you took out all the private info from the document before you paste it here. With that said, let's try to grab out the date. If I scroll a little bit up, you can see our date is here. It's structured the same on each invoice. That means that I can make a regex pattern, and a regex pattern is a series of characters that defines a search pattern. What I want to say is that look for a date, take the next line, and take everything on that line. That will be our date. What this looks like is up here in the pattern. We will make a look behind, so that will look like this, a parenthesis just right after me, a question mark, a lesser than, equal to, then we'll say date like this. And now we said look after date, but since it's a new line, we will also make sure to specify that in here. So here I'll have a /r /n. Now we can start to extract the things that we want. So move outside the parentheses, have a dot and a plus. Now we have everything. To make sure that we have no unwanted space in the end, I'll have a /, then I'll have D for digits, and I'll say I need 4 digits. That'll be the same. What this does, it says that we wanted to look behind a date and a line break. That will start here. So this guy up here, it doesn't extract anything. It just said look after something. Then we have the dot. A dot is everything. The plus is one or more characters of the dot. That means everything. And then we says the last part should be 4 digits. That will be our year. Now go copy this pattern here, Control C, move to your start menu, find Notepad. I like to open Notepad and save the information here about our patterns because we are going to create 4 patterns. So here I'll say date and put in the pattern for the date. We also want the account name. So here I'll say account name. And if we look closely, we can see that we have an account name here. Then we need to find something that's always close to it. That could be the invoice number. So the invoice number will always be 2 lines behind because we will have the invoice number, then the actual invoice number, and we will have the account name. That means that we can just change this up here a little. I'll say just look for characters like this. And then we can say look after, instead of date, I'll make the RegEx pattern to say invoice number. But as you can see here, we're getting the invoice number. We are not interested in that. So then I want to say, well, I still want to look behind these characters, and then I want a line break more. So I'll say RN, this is a line break. Now we have the account name. Copy your pattern, move to your notepad, and paste it in. It's that easy. So RegEx is not something to fear. It's straightforward, and you should learn it now. Then we want to search for the email. Here we will search for this little ad here, but we could make other patterns that will match it. For example, say behind the date. What we will do here is that we will delete all of this. So we say we want to search for some characters. Then we want an ad, and then we want some characters on the same line. This is a very simple email pattern. We could make it more specific, but that's not the case of this exercise. Just copy this pattern back to your notepad and paste it in under the email. Then we want to create a total. Again, we will find a total that will be all the way down here. We will create it similar to the two dates and account name. So because we are lazy, let's copy this, move it into the pattern. What are we going to look behind here? That will be total, colon, and a space. First, we will say, what are we going to look behind? We're going to look behind a total, a colon, a space, and I don't want to grab the $sign right now. So what I do is that I cannot write $sign like this. I need to escape it because we'll use $sign in other ways. Then I want to say, look for digits and a dot here. So let me delete this as well. Let me make a hard bracket. And the way to do it will be digits like this, a dot like this, a hard bracket, and then a plus. We will have the amount. Now grab this pattern and put it into our total. I will grab the date. Let's start with that and move back to Power Automate Desktop. Find a parse text and drag it in beneath the extract text from PDF here. The text to parse, that will be the extracted PDF text. So I click this variable picker here, double click the extracted PDF text. What do we need to find? That will be our RegEx pattern. So simply just Control V, paste in your RegEx pattern. Then you will say it is a regular expression, so tick this. The variables produced. We have the match, that will be the date as we are extracting it. We are also having the position, that will be the position in the original text. We are not going to use it, so let's disable it to not confuse ourselves. Then we'll click Save. Now try to run your flow. Over here in Match, double click it. You can see that we have extracted the date, and the solution will be to have 4 parse text, 1 for account name, 1 for email, and 1 for total as well. But that will make a very static solution where we will have a lot of parse text. Imagine that we're going to get out a lot of data from the PDF. We could make a much more dynamic solution, and it will be straightforward to update it in case we want to extract further things from the PDF later on. So up here in Initialization, we will create a new data table. Find that here, so I'll say create new data table and drag it in after the set variable. The variables produced, we will call this one RegEx. So type in RegEx. This is short for regular expression. Then I'll click Edit. Here I want 3 columns. I'll double click the first one, that will be the name. I'll double click the next one, that will be pattern. Then I'll click this little plus out here, that will add another column. double click it again, and that will be my match. Then we will have 4 rows. So I'll do like this. Each row is one of the things that we want to extract. So date, account name, email, and total. The patterns, we just created those. So we have the date here, copy it, move in here and paste it in. And you take the account name like this. And you take the email here. And you take the total like this. Then we click save. Once more. Now we loop through each one of these patterns from up here and extract the corresponding PDF text. So what you will find here is a for each. Drag it in below here to start with. We're going to iterate through the RegEx data table. In the RegEx data table, that's just imagine an Excel sheet with columns and rows. A data table is structured the same, you just sort. We will store it into the current item. That means that for each one of these iterations, we can refer to the current row as current item. Then we'll click save. We will also create a supporting variable. So I'll find a set variable. I'll drag it in before the for each. We will give it the name row number. It will start at 0. That's because a data table is 0 indexed. So the first row will be 0. And that's a little bit confusing. That's the way it is in programming. You'll get used to it. And that means that the second element will be 1, the third element will be 2, and so forth. We also want to add 1 to this row number for each one of these iterations. So drag in another set variable in the for each. Click the X, double click the row number. Click this X here, double click the row number. We're going to add 1 to it. And when you want to do these calculations, you want to move inside these percentage signs and say +1 and click save. Now drag in this parse text inside the for each. It's very important that you do it here in the beginning. Double click to open it. Because now we will not take this static pattern, but we will use the pattern from the data table. So we'll use it for each one of these rows. And that means that we will delete this. So here we'll say, click this X. We want to look in the RegEx data table. Double click that. Then we want to say, we want to look into the row number. That's why we created this supporting variable. So have a hard bracket start. Go to this variable picker. Scroll down to row number and double click. Here you need to remove these percentage signs. We only need to have percentage signs in the start and in the end of a code block. Then you can say hard bracket end. We also want to specify which column do we want to look in. We could do that with a number or the actual header. So here I'll do it with the header. I'll say hard bracket end. I'll say single quotation marks because this is a text. And these patterns, we called the column header pattern here. And then I'll have a hard bracket end. Then I'll click save. I want to store this match in our data table. Remember, we made a match column. So I find another set variable. Here again, it's important that you do it after the parse text and before the other set variable. So the order is very important. Where do I want to store it to? Well, I want to store it into the RegEx data table. And then I move up here. I want to store it in the row number. Now I'm writing it here. That will be a little bit easier once you get used to it. So here I'll say row number. I want to store it in the match column. So not the pattern. The pattern we read from, and we are storing it in the match column. The value, that will be the match that we just got from this parse text. So I will have match, double click that, and I'll click save. Now try to click to the left of this 12. That will add a breakpoint, this little red. That means that our automation will pause once we reach this step. So click run. Here you can see that our match, that is the date. I'll click run once more. Here you will see we get the account name over the match. We will have the email. And we will have the total. I can click run. Our automation ends. Let's disable this breakpoint by clicking it again. We also can look in the RegEx data table. Here we have stored our information. That's how easy RegEx is. So click close here. Then minimize this. We can also close this notepad. Save it if you're going to need it. I will not. And close the RegEx tester. In the course materials, in the link folder here, double click it. There's this link to RPA in a day. Go open it. That is Microsoft official training material. We will use a sample application. So scroll a little bit down. Download this one here, aka MS RPA in a day package. If this link doesn't work, I'll make another link in the video description. Up here you can see that we are downloading it. We will open up the file. What we are going to use is that we're going to go in here, go down to the prerequisite lab number 1, and here you will find the Contoso Invoicing setup. Drag it to your desktop, then double click it to install the Contoso Invoicing setup. As I said, this is only a sample application. So let's go install it. There you go. We have installed it. I'll click close. Let us just close this and minimize this. It's placed here on my desktop. It's also in the C:program files if you want to find it there. Double click the Contoso Invoicing setup. This is the application. It mimics perfectly a legacy app. What we are going to do is that when we open this, we want to move to invoices, and then we want to add the data to this one here. That is done by clicking new record up here. We're putting in our date. We extracted that, remember? The account name, the contact, the amount. We want to set the status to invoiced, and then we want to click save. After we have done that, we will close down the application. So let's take one step at a time. I'll be closing this. And let me show you where you can find the path to this Contoso Invoicing setup. So I'll go to my Windows Explorer. Then I'll move down to my C drive, Program Files x86. And here you can see Contoso Inc., Contoso Invoicing. And this is the legacy invoicing app.exe that we're using. Shift right click on it, copy as path. We're going to use this path in Power Automate Desktop. Go back here. Up here in Initialization, you'll drag in another set variable. This one will be the Contoso path. So I'll click, say, Contoso path. In the value, I'll press Ctrl V. I'll remember to remove the quotation marks like this, and then I'll click Save. Up here in the Initialization, we are setting the variables that we use in the flows, and we open up our applications. So find a run application and drag it in here. The application path, simply just say Ctrl V. We just copy it here. So I'll delete this quotation mark and this one. And in the variables produced, we can see that we have an app process ID. We will use that to close the application when we are done with it. Then I can click Save. Now we will create a region below here. That region, that will be our application work. So I'll drag in another region down here below. This one here, I'll say type into app, and then I'll click Save. Let me scroll a little bit down. So after we open the Contoso Invoicing app, let us just do that. We want to click Invoices up here. So we are going to find a click UI element in Window and drag it in here as the first item in the region type into app. Click this drop down, add UI element. And let me move it over here. So here we have the Contoso Invoices here that is under document entry. Just pick this text, press Ctrl on your keyboard and click with your mouse. we have created the UI element and we want to left click it just as we do as human. Then I can click save. I also want to click the new record up here. So I'll find another click UI element in window, drag it below the first one, click this drop down, add UI element. And now we are actually here in invoice, so we can go click that. And then we want to click this button here. We can see we can have an image and a button. Let's just pick button. It won't make a difference. So press Control and click with your mouse. We have created this UI element. Now click Save. Best practice is always to rename these UI elements. You can say this one is called Text Invoices and this one is called Button. Go over here to the right to this stack of elements here. This one here, Text Invoices, I'll call this Button Invoices. I can click it here and then I can click F2 on my keyboard. This one makes me able to rename it. I'll call this Button Invoices. Then I click Enter. Similarly down here, this is the new record. I'll click F2 again. This is a little bit confusing, button, so I'll say button and then I will say new record like this. Now we need to, after we click this new record, we need to fill in date, account, contact, and amount. For those, you will find a populate text field in window, drag it in beneath the click UI element. Then we will say this drop down, add UI element, find the date here, press Control on your keyboard and go select it. So what text should we fill in? This was the date, so let me move this. We actually have this date, remember, and let me just click save here. This will give us an error. That is fine, I'll just minimize this. Go to your variables, go to RegEx. So our date that we want to fill in, that is actually here in the match. So I can say RegEx, then I can say, that's the name of the data table. I can say the first row, that is index 0. And then I can say fill in whatever is in the match column here, or simply just the third column, that is index 0. Then I can save a little bit of characters if I want that. Let's go try that. So open up the populate text field in window, go up here. Click this X, that's the variable picker. Double click the RegEx. So I wanted to say, look in the first row and the third column, that will be 2, like this. Then I can click save. Now let's go try run it again, and let me just close the Contoso Invoicing app just to see that it works, everything we did so far. So we extracted it, and here, because this Contoso app is a little bit slow, it will take a few seconds. There you go. We have now filled in this date, and you can see that it's easily getting converted to the correct format. Similarly, we will fill in the account, contact, amount, and set the status. So I go here. Another populate text field in window. I will add a new UI element that will be the account. So Control and select the account field. Again, we will look in the RegEx. This time it is the second row, that is index 1. And still it is in the third column, that is index 2. So this one is where we store the actual account name. Let's create one more. Find the contact here, this field. Control on your keyboard, click with your mouse. We have it. So again, we go to this variable picker, RegEx, and move in here. Say we want a third row now, that is where we have this one here, and then it's still the third column, like this. Then we can click save. Now we just need the last one, so have this populate text field in window once more. We are going to find the amount here. And again, we will have the RegEx. This time it is 3 and then 2, and we will click save. Let's also fill in the last ones before we test it. For the drop-down combo box, we will have a set drop-down And now my Power Automate is a little bit slow. Go drag it in here below. Let's go find the drop down. So I add the UI element. That will be this combo box. Control on your keyboard, click with your mouse. And here we will not clear the selected options. We will select option by name. What name do we want to select? That will be invoiced. So go to your Power Automate desktop flow and type invoiced. Then we'll click save. We also need to click save after we done this. This will be another click UI element in window. So find a click UI element in window, down here, add UI element, find this save button up here, control on your keyboard and click it. That's it. Then we can click save. Now try to run and inspect your flow. I'll click run here. So we are extracting the data. Now we will click invoices in a few seconds here. We are creating the date, the account, the contact, the amount, and invoiced, and we'll click save. So far, so good. We have extracted the data with RegEx, and we have typed it into our application. Minimize this, Contoso. So right here, we are again using for populate text field in Windows, and we could create a much more dynamic solution. So we are creating a dynamic selector solution. This is another important concept. So we move over here to the UI elements. Here we can see we have edit text box 2, 3, and 4. That is these 4 that we just created, that equals to date, account, contact, and amount. We're going to use the selectors for these. So again, we will open up another notepad. This one will be the selectors. So, and let us just see what they correspond to. Well, first, I'll just write in date here, move down a few lines. I'll say account. Here I'll say contact, and then I will say amount. So right now, we're going to grab the selectors for each of these 4s here. We are going to grab them in here. So the first one, that will be the date. Double click the edit text box. Down here is our selector. You can simply just mark everything, Control A, Control C, or mark it with your mouse. You can click cancel. Go to your notepad, paste in the selector up here. This is how our selector looks. We're going to do the same for the account. So open up the text box too. Control A, Control C, cancel. Do like this. Text box 3. Go down here. Control A, Control C. That is the contact. And finally the edit text box 4. The trick here is that we only want to have one of these selectors. Imagine again, if we have a lot of things to fill in, we can just store these selectors in our data table. So now we go up here to the create new data table in the beginning, and you can also see the power of regions. We have a nice overview of what's going on, and I can even collapse these things if I want to do that. Now I want to move into the create new data table. I'll click edit. Here we will add a new column. So I'll click the plus here, double click here. I'll call the new column selector, and I'll paste in the selector for date, account name, email, total. So that's why we grabbed them. This one is for date. So I'll simply just go in here, Control V, and move to the next. That will be the account name. Go copy that. And let me just be sure that we are in here, like this. So now we have that one. I'll double click in here, and then we will grab the contact here. Like this. And finally, we will have the last selector. That will be the amount. Like this. So now let me just show you what happened. We copied in each one of the selectors here, so we can simply just call them and we will create a dynamic selector. So then we'll click save. I'll click save once more. In the region, type into app. Yeah, that is where we want to skip all these 4 here, or at least 3 of them. After the first 2, click UI element in window. We'll find a for each. So drag in a for each. A for each simply just again loops this data table. So that's what we're going to do. So I will click this X here and I'll double click the RegEx. Here I can just pick the current item again. We are done with it up here. It doesn't matter. I'll click save. Do you want to network and solve Power Automate desktop problems with 7,000 RPA developers? Then you should join the I Love Automation Discord. The link is right up here in the corner. Now drag in the first populate text field in window. This one is the action that we're going to use and we will use for our dynamic selector. So double click to open it. First of all, we're just going to look at the current item instead of the RegEx. That means that we can skip this one here, since now we are iterating through it. So I say current item, and then I say look in the third column. That is where our text is. So if I click save here, and let me just open up the create data table again to make it show you. So here comes our match. That is where we want to take out the value and fill it in the Contoso Invoicing app. Let me click save here. With that in place, right now we are filling it into the date field. We want to make it dynamic. So let me click save here again. Then we go over to the UI elements. So this is the edit text box. That's the one we use here. Let us go over to UI elements. The selector that we're using right now, that is the edit text box. And this one I want to make dynamic. So I right click, rename. Here I want to say Contoso input field. That's just the name. Let's go fix the selector. So double click here. This is the current selector for the date field. Go to text editor. We're going to delete all of this since we stored the selector in our data table up here. Since we're iterating through that exact data table, click this X, say current item, like here. And where did we store the selector? That was in column 4, that is index 3. So then I can click save. Now I'm not going to use these 3 populate text field in window. So I mark them, I can click the first one, press shift, click the last one, press delete. I also don't need these 3 edit text boxes. One nice feature of Power Automate Desktop is that I can click these 3 dots, remove unused elements, and click delete, like this. We're also going to rename these 2. So this combo box, we can give it a more nice name. That's always also a best practice. Here I can say that's the status. This button, that is the save. So I right click, rename, then I click save. Now I want to set the run delay to 1 so it goes a little bit faster. And let's go test it. So I click run here. We are opening up the invoicing app, and in a little while we will click invoice here. We'll add a new field. We'll have the date, account, contact, amount, and invoiced, and we click save. That's it. We have now created a dynamic selector. For our reconciliation, then we want to grab this ID here. So let me go back here. Before the last click UI element in window, we want to grab it. So go up here, find and extract data from window here and drag it in here. So the window, we're going to click the drop down, add UI element. And here we are going to pick this text. Control on your keyboard, click it. Now we have extracted it. We will not extract it into an Excel spreadsheet, but a variable. This one I will call ID instead of data from window. So then I can click save. One thing that I want to check is this seems like I don't want to have this 1086 in my selector, because that means that it only works when the ID is that. So again, I go to my UI elements. I can, first of all, I can right click, rename, and here I want to say text ID first. Then I can double click it. And here it looks like we haven't included this 1086 here in the selector, especially here in the child. So that is fine. I can click save. We are done with grabbing the ID. Try to run your automation again. Again, we're just doing the same thing. We are testing a lot, and hopefully in the end we have built a very powerful solution that have taught you a lot. So invoiced here. And if you move over here to the variables in Power Automate Desktop, you can see that if I double click the ID, we indeed have the ID grabbed, so we can fill in the Excel a little bit later. I also wanted to, because this Contoso app, we have opened up quite a few. I can just close these ones manually, but we don't like manual work. So I opened up the application up here called app process ID. That's the variable produced. I can use this variable to terminate it in the end. So by the end, I'll have another region. I'll drag it in here. I'll call this end, and I'll click save. In here, you will have a terminate process. Drag it in there. So we will specify the process not by the name, but by the ID. And we will use the app process ID. That was the one that was generated up here. So I double click it and click save. We can try to run it again. As you can see, we run our automation a lot just to test each step. Don't worry, this is just a demo application, so we can do nothing wrong. And you should always have a developer environment where you can build and see that it works. As you can see, we terminated the application. Time for our reconciliation. That is, we want this data that we type into our application. We also want to save it in an Excel sheet. Maybe we're going to use the data further on. And we actually, if I minimize these, if I go to the course data, so that one is in the project folder. If you look in the output folder, we have an Excel sheet here. Double click to open it. Here we're going to add, as we put in the data, we will add it to this Excel sheet. Close the Excel sheet. And a good thing could be to just, if this is a name that's really hard to spell, so I go in here and I grab everything. In case you don't see the ending, don't worry, we can just add that manually. Just grab the name here. So and that is, you mark it, Control A, Control C, so we have it on our clipboard. We go to Power Automate Desktop. Let's make a new region before the end. So up here, you'll have a new region. That's it. And you will write in reconciliation. Well, this is a hard word, but I have it in my clipboard, so we can also use it here. Just remember to delete the extension. I can click save. Now let's go open up the Excel book. So I'll find a launch Excel. I'll drag it into the reconciliation. So I'm launching Excel and I'm opening up the following document. Well, I know I'm in the project path, right? So, and then I can say output, then another / Control V reconciliation. In case you don't see the ending, that is the .xlsx, simply just add that to reconciliation. Untick the Make Instance Visible and click Save. Untick the Make Instance Visible and click Save. And here I, for some reason, placed it in the reconciliation. I will argue that we should place it up here in the initialization where we open our apps. And what you just do here is that you mark this launch Excel, press Control X, go up here. Where do we want it? Well, that could be just before the Contoso Invoicing app. So I click this Run Application and I press Control V. We now open it up here. go down to your reconciliation region again. The first thing we will do is to set the active Excel worksheet. That's always the best practice because we had 2 sheet names in our Excel book. And if another user have opened the other sheet first, or we just made some work in it, we will work with the data there. So make sure that, and let me just show you what this is actually about. So I open up the Excel book again. I want to work in the invoices, but there's also a sheet called Anders Jensen org. This is, by the way, some good links if you want to follow my work. I share a lot of tips and tricks. But we want to make sure that we always read from the invoices and not from any other sheet. So it looks like this. Go to Actions. I'll find a Set Active Excel worksheet and I drag it in here. We're going to look in the Excel instance. That was the instance that was created with the launch Excel. We want to activate the worksheet with the name Invoices. Then I click Save. Our Excel sheet already have or might have data in it. Our had 2 rows. So we need to figure out where to write the next line of data. For that, we will use a get first free column row. Make sure you pick this one and not this one. You can see those 2 looks a lot like each other. You should pick the get first free column row right in after the set active Excel worksheet. What this does, it just produces 2 variables, the first free column and the first free row. We are not going to use the first free column. We just want to find the first free row. So we untick this. Again, best practice, we're not creating variables that we're not going to use. Now you click Save. Now we can write to our Excel sheet because we have all the data that we want. Remember, we just grab the ID and the rest of the data that will be here from the RegEx, that will be these guys here in the match column. So go up here, find a write to Excel worksheet like this. The value to write. Now it will get a little bit advanced. Don't worry. Please rewind or pause the video if things goes too fast now. The video is designed for that. Up here in the value to write, we will create a data row. We will do that by having 2 percentage signs. Make a space and then we will have a curly brackets. And in the end, make another space like this and we will have a curly bracket. The spaces will get ignored by runtime, but it makes it easier for you to read while I write it for you. So then to make our row, I'll make another space. I'll do it here as well. We will have 2 hard brackets starting in the end. So this is how a data row looks like. We just need to fill it with data. In here, I want the structure of this reconciliation sheet. And that is, I want the ID, date, account name, contact email, amount, and then the status that should just be invoiced because that's all we do here. But in case we want another status, we can also have a variable for that. So I go back here. So I knew that the first one, that was the ID. That is the ID variable. We don't need to put it in quotation mark because it is a variable and we refer to variables without quotation marks. Then I can press comma. Then we'll have the next value. We'll find that in the RegEx here. And the date, that will be, so that will be RegEx, a hard bracket, that will be the first row. And we had it, the date in the 3rd column. That is where we store our matches. So it will look like this. And now let me just save it. We will give an error. That's fine. Just to show you, so we are completely sure what we're doing. We're grabbing this column. That is column 2. Then we'll click close and open up the write to Excel worksheet once more. Make sure that you are actually going here right after the 2 and the hard brackets. Then we'll have another comma. Since these expressions will look like each other, simply just copy this RegEx hard bracket 02, Control C. Then you will paste it in here. You will have a comma, paste it in once more, comma, paste it in and have space. Now we will simply just say this 0 was the date. Then we'll have the 1, 2, and 3, that is the row 3. Finally, we will have it saying invoiced. That was the last column. Again, this was a little bit fast, but I hope you understand it. In case you don't understand this is very important, so please rewind the video and try to get your head around why we make this. This is just a data row that we can put into our Excel sheet. I'll put it into column A. That is where we want to start. And then the row, that was the first free row, because that is where I want to put the next row in. So click this little X, double click the first free row, and while I click array, you can see we don't have an error anymore. Now we can click save. We're writing to the instance, but we also need to save it. We do that here in the end. So go up here and find a close Excel, drag it here. Here we will just save it into the place where the data is, so we will not create a new instance. Now you can click save, try to run your automation, and make sure that, of course, we know that the first part works, but we want to make sure that the last part works, that is the Excel reconciliation work. And now we are clicking the invoices in a few seconds. And then we start our work. Sometimes with these legacy apps, it will take a little bit longer. As you can see, it looks like Power Automate Desktop is stalling. It's not, it's just because this is an old application. This mimics perfectly our old applications. You know, application can stall, it can be hard to work in. And we can see that in a little while, we'll see that Power Automate Desktop fine can do the work here, and no matter how slow this is. So I'll just fast forward to when Power Automate Desktop starts working. There you go, we clicked invoices. Yes, it took a minute or so, but that's how old applications behave. And that's what we deal with here in our RPA development. Now it looks like everything went smooth. So I go here, go into the reconciliation here. There you go. We have now added in a new line. We might want to work a little bit with data formatting, because you can see here the dates here. That one was called this, and this is the data that we got out. Let's go fix the date time. So what we'll do here is that we will close this, go back here. And you can see we have a lot of regions. We can collapse them so we can better see what's going on. So these are our regions, we have actions in them. Right before the type into app, we will make our date time conversion. So find a region, move it in here. We will call this one date time conversion, like this, and I'll click save. So we will find our text from the data table right here. This guy here, we will convert this to a format that was used in Excel, and it's also used in our application, but our application handled this. We could type this in and then the application converted it. But in case our application doesn't convert it, and we will convert it now, we will also make sure that it will work in our Excel log. So up here, you will find a convert text to date time. The reason why we convert it to a date time is so that we can work with it. Then we will convert it back to a text, specify the format, and save it into the data table. That is our strategy. So first we will find the convert text to date time here. Make sure you drag it into the date time conversion. The text to convert, well, we have it in our RegEx data table, like this. Then we'll say, we know it's in the first row and it's in the third column, right? Let me just recap it. It's in the third column, 0, 1, 2, like this. Let me open it again. The date is represented in a custom format. That is, it's what's called sept 21 and a year. So we need to specify that here in the custom format. This is, if you want to know more, .NET custom date time. You can easily Google it, and here you might also know it from Excel. That will be the month represented by 3 letters. Then we will have the day, comma, and 4 Ys as the year. We will save it into text as DateTime. So I'll click Save. Now we have it in the DateTime. We will convert it back to a text where we specify the format. You can have this convert DateTime to text. The DateTime to convert, that will be the text as DateTime. We just created that one. The format, that will be custom. And what format do we want to have out? Well, we wanted to have the month first, then we wanted the days, and then we wanted the 4 Ys as year. Let me just open the reconciliation sheet again. You can see that that is the format we had in the 2 first rows. So we also want to have it here. This is also the format that's used in our application. So we go back here. Now we saved it into a formatted DateTime. We will update our data table. So what we'll do here is that we'll find a set variable. And up here we will say, we want to look in the RegEx. Then I want to update the first row, the second column, hard brackets, like this. What values should be there? That will be the formatted DateTime. So it looks like this. I'll click Save. And we will run it again to see that we have done our DateTime conversion nicely. I'll fast forward over this invoices click. We know it's a little bit slow to start up this app. Doesn't matter. It will just run in the background in production. Let me speed it up and come back when Power Automate Desktop had clicked Invoices. Now you can see we type in the correct date time. That is nice. Click Invoiced, we saved, and in a few seconds we save it. Let's go to our reconciliation sheet. There you go. We now have our date in the correct format. Let us close this down again. So far we only extracted one PDF. That was our sample, but now we want to expand the solution so it will work on multiple PDFs. And let us just do this again. The first one we will do, that is to talk, where do we want to take the PDFs from? We have these emails, that is our end goal. Those ones will be in Outlook, and we want to extract these Outlook messages and grab the attachments, which are the PDF's invoices. But let's create one step at a time, because in input PDFs, we have all these 6 PDFs. That is our input directory. We'll solve for that first. So up here in the region Initialization, you will find a Get Files in folder. Drag it in here. The folder that we're going to use the project path. Then we want to look in the input, so a backward slash once more, say PDFs. And I only, in case we have other files, I only want to take them that ends with PDF. So had an asterisk, then .pdf. Variables produced, let's us also rename this. So this one will be PDF files. We'll click Save. Between the region Initialization and the region Extract Invoices, we will have a for each here. So you'll drag this for each in between these two. The value to iterate, that will be our PDF files here. And then we'll say store into current PDF. Like this. We will click Save. Because we designed this so well, it will be very easy to just make a few changes and then it will work on multiple PDFs. Open up the Extract Invoices region here. Scroll a little bit down. Click the region up here. Press Shift on your keyboard and click the End region. Now you will move it in here. We will also open up the extract text from PDF, because now we are not going to read this static PDF, but we will read the current PDF up here. So delete this, click this variable picker, find the current PDF like this, and click Save. Then we can collapse this. Now go to your DateTime conversion, open it, click the region up here, click the End region while you have Shift in your keyboard, drag it in below here. Then we'll collapse this as well. We also have the type into app that will happen for each one of these invoices. So I go this, mark everything, then I drag this one in here. And again, I collapse it. So now we just need the reconciliation, because the end, we have designed that was just terminate the process and close the Excel. That will only happen once. So we only need to have this reconciliation in. I'll do this, and there you go. That's how easy it is to expand it, because we used best practices to structure our workflow. Let me just save. There's no autosave in Power Automate Desktop, just to make sure that in case a breakdown happens, you have your flow. Then we will click Run. And again, I'll fast forward over this step. You know the drill. Now we clicked it. And now we will see that we are putting in multiple PDFs. That will be all our 6 ones. We click Save. Now you see that we put in the next one. That will be the same account name and contact email, but we will have different amounts and different dates. There you go. We have now a working solution for multiple PDFs. We're still not done with the solution, but I will speed this up and then we will solve the rest of the case. That's it. Let's also go to the reconciliation sheet here, just to make sure that we are getting in all these data. There you go. We have now solved it for the next 6 rows. What we want to do now is to solve the entire use case, because the case is built around that we get these ones into Outlook, these invoices. So in the emails, you'll find 6 emails. Simply just drag and drop them over to your Outlook. I've done that, and make sure you create, for example, 2 subfolders to the inbox. I call it Invoices and Processed Invoice. So what this is, let me just open one of them. This is just an email with the attachment. The attachment is just what we saw before. So we are expanding the solution. Let us go create it. So we want Power Automate Desktop, instead of reading it from the folder, we want to grab these things to the folder, and then we will read it from the folder. Let's go do that here. First, we go to Initialization. We need to open up a new instance of Outlook. And again, I really want you to place these emails in your inbox and do these things with me. You'll learn the most. So here we'll have a launch Outlook, somewhere between around the launch Excel and run application. The order is not important. Here you can see that we are opening up an Outlook instance. I'll click Save. Let's also close it again here in the end region. So I'll find a close Outlook here and drag it in the end region. This will just close the Outlook instance. I'll click Save. Now we move up, because before we do all this, let me just talk a little bit about where we want these things to be in. Because these PDFs, they come before this extraction. So we will have a region up here. So here I'll have a region, drag it in here. This one will be called Outlook Work, like this. So what we will do here is to retrieve the messages from Outlook. So I'll find a retrieve email messages from Outlook, pick this one and drag it into Outlook Work. The Outlook account, that is your data file account. Let me show you how you find this. Go to Outlook, go to File, go to Account Settings, click Data Files, and this is the name you're looking for. So this one is called Anders@andersjensen.org. I'll use that in Power Automate Desktop as account. So that one was important to have in. Then I want the folder. Since I placed mine in a subfolder called Invoices, I will have Inbox. Then I'll say Invoices. Sorry, that was a lot of S's. So I want to say I want to retrieve all email messages. mark as read, that's not really important. We will not, sometimes you can use that, but it's very, very unstable since people can go into these inboxes and read them and it doesn't really say anything. But what we want to do is to save the attachments like this. Then we want to say, where do we want to store the attachments to? If I go back here, let us store them in input, and I want to create a folder called attachments here. So instead of PDFs, it will be the same, but attachments like this. And I go back here. So I want to store them into the project path, / input, and then attachments like this. The variables produced, that will be retrieved emails. That's fine. I'll click save. Then we want to have this get files. We had it up here in the initialization before. Move them after the retrieve email messages, because then we can open it. And here I'll say, grab the files not from PDFs, but from attachments. Again, we created a solution, so it's quite easy to update it. Now this is done. Let me click save. And we click run. So now we will run our automation. What we will see is that the Outlook work will work instead. And again, I'll fast forward towards the invoices click. Here we have our click. We know this works, but we saw that now we're actually getting the emails and attachments from Outlook. And we are creating new entries based on that. That will be the same data, by the way, but it's still nice to see that this works. That's it. What I want to show you now is that in the attachments, we have the attachments from the emails, and we close the Outlook. So if I want to open it again, I'll open it here. And we still have the invoices here. That's fine. We have done nothing with them. We want to move them into a processed invoice subfolder. So go create that one as well. In the attachments, I'll just delete them because these ones come from the email. We will, of course, also move the processed files. To move the processed files, then we go up here. I want to go into my project again. If I go back here, let's create a processed folder where I will move all old PDFs to. So I'll call this one processed like this. Then we go back here. So in the end of this for each, right down here, I'll move the files. So find a move files like this, drag it in below here. The files to move, that will be the current PDF. That was the one we worked on. I'll have the current PDF. Where do I want to move it to? That'll be the project path, / process. That was the directory that we just created. Here, I'll just override it if it exists. We could create a case for that a little bit later where we have dynamic names, so they will not get overridden. The variables produced, that will be moved files. I'll click save here. Now, when I run this, I will speed this up, so see you on the other side, but now we will see that our PDFs will get moved. That's it. And again, it's the same things as before, but if I moved into processed, we have moved the processed here. And that means that in the input attachments, this is empty now. So far so good. But I also wanted to move the processed emails from invoices to processed invoice. Let's create that. Before this region end, we will have another region. So here I'll say region, like this. Now move it in here. I will call this region move emails, and I'll click OK. What I will use here is a process email messages in Outlook. So drag it into the move emails. Again, the account is Anders Jensen. We could have created a variable for this since we're using it more than once, but now we just hard-coded it in. Fine for now. Email messages to processed. That was the retrieved emails. We got it up here on this list of mail messages. Retrieved email messages. What do we want to do? We want to move the email messages to an email folder. And this one will be the inbox. And here you need to create this subfolder in your Outlook. So processed invoices. We'll click save. Now let's go try run this again. I'll fast forward to the end so we can see that we also solved this. That's it. And if we go to Outlook again, and I moved into processed invoiced, these emails have got moved from invoices to processed invoices. We still need to do one thing, so I'll move it back into invoices and minimize it. I also want to be sure I don't overwrite the files when they are moved to processed. So right before the move files, have a rename files. We want to add the date time to it so it will be unique. It looks like this. So rename files, just here. The file to rename, that will be the current PDF. The rename scheme, that will be add date time. Where do we want to add the date time? That will be before the name. The separator, I want that to be underscore, but you can pick whatever you want. Then we want to specify the format. It's fine with years, month, and days. Again, this is .NET custom datetime format. Then I want the hours, minutes, and seconds. This means that we will not overwrite anything because we don't process the files within 1 second. If file exists that do nothing, but this will not happen, so that's fine. Now please save it back to the current PDF so we can just use it here in the move files. So here we just rename it and we use it here. Let us save it. And again, I hope you're still with me because you will learn a lot of things in this exercise, especially how to build an entire project. Now run the solution once more. What we're going to see now is that we are creating unique file names, and we're not going to overwrite anything, and we're not going to have them renamed 1, 2, 3, 4, or all these things. So we will create timestamps on it, then it will be much more easier to find once we want to get back to them as a business user. Now let's fast forward and check it. That's it. And if I move, what I want to check now is in the processed folder. You can see that we now add timestamps to these. That means that each file is unique. We're never going to confuse ourselves or overwrite anything. Let me minimize this. Today's important takeaway is that we break everything down to small bites and solve the problems one by one. We run our solution over and over to see that this little added step works as well. Now you should network and solve Power Automate problems with more than 7,000 RPA developers. Your invitation is right here. It's free. See you there.